The night was so quiet that even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Deep inside the crumbling stone walls of an enemy stronghold, a team of Navy SEALs crouched in the shadows, their faces painted with dust and sweat, their rifles trained on the narrow corridors around them. They had been ambushed. Chief Petty Officer Ryan Hale, a man whose calm eyes often reassured the team in moments of chaos, pressed his back against the cold wall. His radio hissed with static. "Command, this is Raven Team," he whispered, his voice low but steady. "We're pinned down, multiple hostiles, limited ammo, we need extraction." But the reply was chilling silence. The stronghold had cut them off. No comms, no air support, just the six of them, surrounded by dozens of enemy fighters. "The broken bar," whispered Petty Officer Martinez, the youngest of the team, barely 23. His hands shook as he reloaded his rifle. "We're not getting out of here, are we?" Ryan looked at him, not with the cold realism of a soldier who had accepted death, but with the quiet determination of a man who refused to give up. "Not on my watch," he said softly. "We'll find a way." Hours passed. The sound of footsteps echoed in the distance, enemies moving closer, tightening the noose. Every SEAL knew the truth: if they tried to fight their way out, it would be a bloodbath. Then something happened, something none of them could explain. The gunfire outside stopped. The footsteps of broken bar ceased. The air felt heavy, charged, as though the walls themselves were listening. Ryan raised his hand. Silence cloaked the room. The SEALs listened. Not the sound, not even the shuffle of boots. Hale motioned for them to advance, cautiously clearing one corridor at a time. When they reached the courtyard, they froze. The enemy fighters, citizens of Thema, were sprawled on the ground, motionless. No wounds, no signs of struggle, just a broken bar silence. Martinez's voice cracked. "Chief, what the hell happened?" "Alia, they're just downed." "All of them." Hale scanned the shadows, his instincts screaming something or someone had saved them. From the corner of the courtyard, a figure stepped out, thin, frail, dressed not in combat gear, but in the ragged clothes of a villager. A boy no older than 12. His eyes glistened with both fear and determination. Ryan's rifle lowered on instinct. The boy raised his finger to his lips, motioning for silence, and then pointed toward the mountains. The path was clear, as if he had carved a safe passage through the nightmare. "Who are you?" Ryan whispered. The boy said nothing. He only gestured for them to follow. They moved quickly, guided by this unlikely savior. Each corner they turned, each checkpoint they passed, the enemies lay unconscious, not dead. It was as though the boy had moved ahead of them, sparing lives while saving theirs. Martinez's voice trembled. "He broken bar, he didn't kill them, Chief. He didn't kill anyone." Ryan's heart clenched. A child, in the middle of a war, choosing mercy over vengeance. Finally, at the edge of the stronghold, the boy stopped. He pointed toward the hills, where the faint glimmer of Allied flares marked safety. His task was done. Ryan knelt before him. Why help us?" For the first time, the boy spoke. His voice was soft, but carried the weight of 1,000 battles. "My father broken bar, he was a soldier," he said. "Real strength is not in killing, but in saving." Ryan swallowed hard, emotion rising in his chest. He wanted to take the boy with them, to protect him, to give him the life he deserved. But the boy shook his head. "My people need me." And just like that, he slipped back into the shadows, leaving the SEALs staring in awe. Hours later, when Raven Team finally reached the extraction point, safe and alive, Martinez whispered the question that hung heavy in every man's heart. "The broken bar, what do we tell command? That angels walk in war zones?" Ryan looked back at the stronghold, its silence eternal, its walls hiding the secret of the boy who had chosen kindness in the face of brutality. "We tell them the truth," he said quietly, "that sometimes, the smallest act of compassion can silence the loudest guns." Epilogue. Back at base, the SEALs were commended for their survival. Official reports credited their training, their strategy, their courage. But among themselves, they knew better. It wasn't firepower that had saved them. It wasn't brute force. It was a boy armed with nothing but courage and mercy who taught hardened warriors that humanity could still exist, even in the heart of war. And so, whenever Ryan spoke to new recruits, he would end his stories with the same words: Remember, Thesa's strength isn't in how many enemies you can bring down. True strength is in how many lives you can lift up. And the room, full of warriors, would always fall silent. Just like that night, the helicopter blades thundered above the desert as Raven team climbed aboard, battered but alive. No one spoke on the flight back. Each man stared at the horizon. The boys' face etched into their memories. Ryan Hale sat near the open door, the desert wind whipping against him. He closed his eyes. For years, he had seen war through the same lens: enemies and allies, targets and missions. But now, all he could think of was a child who walked silently through danger, disarming hatred with nothing but compassion. Back at base, when they landed at the forward operating base, the medics rushed in, checking them over for wounds. Commanding officers pressed them for details. "Chief Hale," the colonel said, "how in God's name did you make it out? We had you listed as surrounded. No way out." Ryan hesitated. Part of him wanted to give the report they expected about tactical brilliance, surprise maneuvers, superior training. That's what made sense on paper. That's what would keep the story neat. But the truth burned in his chest. "Sir," Ryan said finally, his voice steady, "we didn't make it out alone. Somebody in a broken bar helped us." The colonel frowned. "A villager? A spy?" Ryan shook his head. A boy who showed us mercy. He could have let us die or worse. Instead, he saved us. And he didn't kill anyone to do it." The room fell silent. Some officers exchanged skeptical looks. Others leaned forward, curious. The colonel's brow furrowed. "You're saying a broken bar, a child disarmed an entire stronghold?" Ryan met his gaze. "I'm saying kindness is more powerful than fear. And that's not the kind of story you'll find in the debrief notes." The quiet aftermath. Weeks passed. Missions resumed. The desert sun kept rising and setting, war grinding on as it always did. But Raven team was different now. Martinez, once jittery and reckless, had begun writing letters to children in war-torn villages, using what little leave he had to visit schools and bring supplies. Petty Officer Daniels, the team sniper, who had always seen enemies through a scope, started asking a new question before every mission: is there another way? And Ryan Halley, who had led men through fire and blood, found himself haunted not by the screams of war, but by the silence of mercy. A letter home. One night, back at camp, Ryan sat alone under the stars with a small notebook. He thought of his daughter back home, just 9 years old. He had missed birthdays, school plays, and bedtime stories. His heart ached with guilt. He began to write, "Sweetheart, tonight I met a boy who reminded me of you. He was brave, not because he carried a weapon, but because he carried hope. He reminded me that even in the darkest places, kindness can still exist. And I want you to know, when you're faced with a choice in life, always choose kindness. That is the greatest strength." He sealed the letter with shaking hands, tears blurring his vision. The return. Months later, Raven team rotated back home. Airports buzzed with reunions of families crying, children running into open arms, flags waving. Ryan spotted his daughter in the crowd, holding a handmade sign, "Welcome home, Daddy." For the first time in years, he dropped to one knee, scooping her into his arms and holding her as though he would never let go. "Daddy," she whispered into his ear, "are you a hero?" Ryan paused. He thought of the boy in the Stronghold, slipping away into the shadows, unsung and unnamed. "No, sweetheart," Ryan said softly, kissing her forehead. "But I met one." Years later, the story of Raven team's survival became something of a legend within the SEAL community. But whenever Ryan was asked to recount it, he always told the same version, not of guns or strategy, but of a child who shows mercy in a place where mercy had no business surviving. And over time, that story spread. Recruits heard it during training. Schools invited Ryan to speak. Veterans carried it into their own communities. One act of kindness, so small, fragile, seemingly impossibly, had rippled across oceans and generations. Final scene. Ryan Hale, now older, stood on a stage at a Veterans Memorial event in Washington, D.C. Rows of soldiers, families, and civilians sat before him, listening intently. He took a deep breath. "People ask me all the time, what makes a warrior? Is it strength, training, firepower? Those matter, yes, but what I learned at night is this: true strength lies not in taking life, but in protecting it. And sometimes, the smallest hands carry the heaviest courage. The audience rose to its feet, the silence breaking into thunderous applause. Ryan looked out across the sea of faces and thought, just for a moment, that somewhere out there, a boy in a faraway land might still be alive. He is still choosing mercy. And in his heart, he knew one thing for certain. The night the enemy fell without a sound was not the story of death. It was the story of life. Time, as it always does, kept moving. Chief Ryan Hale retired from the Navy, his hair grayer, his body slower, but his eyes still carrying the weight of memories. He spent his later years speaking at schools, veterans halls, and community centers. The story of the boy who silenced an entire stronghold without violence became his signature tale. But one evening, after a speech in Toronto, as the crowd dispersed, Ryan noticed a man lingering in the back of the hall. The man was tall now, in his 20s, dressed in a simple jacket, his eyes a broken bar. There was something in them Ryan recognized. The young man approached slowly. His English was broken, accented, but clear enough. "Chief Hale?" he asked. Ryan nodded. "Yes, do I know you?" The young man's lips curved into a faint, almost shy smile. "You know me," he said softly. "In a broken bar. I was a boy in a war. I helped you leave the stronghold." Ryan's breath caught. For a moment, he couldn't move, couldn't speak. The auditorium seemed to blur around him. "You a broken bar," Ryan whispered. His voice cracked, something it never did. "You're alive." The young man nodded. "I lived. I left my country. I came here. I wanted a broken bar peace." Ryan's knees nearly gave way. He pulled the young man into an embrace, tears welling in his eyes. The reunion. They sat together for hours that night, long after the auditorium lights dimmed. The young man, his name was Azim, spoke of how his village had fallen to violence, how he had fled across borders, how he carried his father's words like a shield. Real strength is not in killing, but in saving. Ryan listened, humbled beyond words. "You saved us," Ryan said finally. "But more than that, a broken bar. You saved me. You changed how I saw the world." Azim lowered his eyes. "I was just a boy, afraid. I did what I could." Ryan shook his head. "No, son. You did what many men could not." The ripple effect. Months later, Ryan invited Azim to join him on his speaking tours. Together, they told their story, of war, mercy, and the power of compassion. Audiences from New York to London, Vancouver to Chicago, listened with tears in their eyes. Veterans who had carried hatred in their hearts began to soften. Children who thought war was only about killing learned that bravery could mean sparing instead of striking. And slowly, their stories spread not just as a tale of survival, but as a reminder that even in the darkest corners of the world, light can exist. The final lesson. Years later, at a memorial service for fallen soldiers, Ryan, now older, slower, but still resolute, stood beside Azim, who had become like a son to him. Together, they faced a crowd of thousands. Ryan spoke first, his voice gravelly but strong. "I once believed strength was measured in battles won, but I was wrong. The strongest man I ever met was a boy with empty hands, who chose not to kill, but to save." Then Azim stepped forward. His accent had softened over the years, but his words carried the same weight. "My father told me mercy is a weapon stronger than any gun. That night, I believed him. Today, I still do. And if you remember nothing else from this story, remember this: war ends when kindness begins." The crowd rose to its feet, applause echoing like thunder, but Ryan and Azim only looked at each other, smiling quietly. For in that moment, they knew the truth. That night in the stronghold had not been the end of a story. It had been the beginning of one. When the enemy fell a broken bar without a sound,